Welcome to No Such Thing as Normal podcast with Natalie Hayes and Jess McKeown.
This is a casual podcast where we talk about all the things you're not supposed to talk about in order to help you normalize your real life, because really we're all just a bunch of weirdos having a completely human experience in a society that asks us to pretend like we're not. We switched roles this week.
We switched roles.
We're testing it out.
I'm your host, Jess, a gifted spirit baby medium who facilitates deep soul healing by channeling divine messages.
And I'm your host, Natalie. I'm a trauma-informed intuitive mindset and manifestation coach. Be sure to subscribe.
We can never do the Oscars together because we'll mess it up. But if you love our hilariousness, we are not stopping this recording. Be sure to subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Watch our 100% unedited episodes on YouTube. And you can also follow us on the gram at No Such Thing as Normal Pod for more weirdo woo content.
And if you like this episode and all of our mistakes and all of our unediting, please be sure to rate and review us so that more people can find us and unleash their own weird with you.
Yes, we were just both so excited to do the intro. Natalie decided to change it up, which I love.
Last second, sprung it on you. I'm sorry. What are we talking about this week?
Well, if last week was the mother wound, and we hope you guys listen to that and talk to your moms, because we sure talk to our moms. This week is the father wound.
Ooh.
Yeah, so fun. Yeah, we need some scary music there.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I guess, yeah, and I think that's like maybe just a fun point to start off in, like in spiritual healing, everything's a fucking wound.
Yeah.
Everything's a deep soul healing. Everything's a traumatic past kind of a thing. We like to make it sound dramatic and heavy over here in the wellness space,
Oh, well, yeah, because then it wouldn't be healing if it wasn't dramatic and heavy, right?
That's right. It would just be what life, or just what would it be?
It would be, I don't know, fun, which is, I feel like, the antithesis of healing sometimes.
Amen to that, right? Like sometimes it is not fun to heal. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. So the father wound, fun thing to talk about. Lots of healing there.
I feel like it's not as talked about as maybe it's because there's so many women in the wellness community, but I feel like the mother wound is more talked about than the father wound.
Yeah. No, I think it's just kind of like the same thing, right? Like the most collect calls are on Father's Day. It's like, yeah. I used to work for American Greetings, the greeting card company. So I have all these weird stats about cards and gifts and holidays, but that was one of them. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I'm actually a real advocate for the male work, the father wound work. I think to have this balance in our work, we need to look at it. I think the mother wound, especially for all the women in the well space, is probably the first one we go to. Maybe it directly affects us more, but the father wound is right behind.
Mm-hmm.
Usually has some, hello, let's just call the father wound its other name, daddy issues.
Yes.
Hi.
Oh, that's the title
especially
of this
when
episode.
You're dating.
That's what we're naming it. This is all about daddy issues.
But it is, right? It's like, you go out and you're dating or whatever, and like you date the man like your father, and all these kind of things. So it's just sort of like this it comes a lot up in relationships, I would say. That's probably where I see it and hear it the most. And maybe a casual conversation, it's the daddy issues. And I think it's a lot with abandonment with dads, right? There's a lot of, that would probably be like maybe their highest contributor to the wound is the abandonment. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like maybe it's less obvious because, let's just say it like it is, like straight white men are put on a pedestal as the father and can't look at their wounds, can't be emotional. So like the women are obviously flawed. One of my favorite memes is like doctors in 1800s, the husband to the doctor is like, oh, my wife cries a lot. And then it's like, my wife who hasn't had any orgasms and 6 babies in the last year. And the doctor's like, well, obviously she's insane. There's just this stigma that like it's more acceptable to talk about mommy
Mm-hmm.
issues than it is to talk about daddy issues, because that would be like admitting fault in this
Oh,
patriarchal
yeah.
society. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, on the Sistine Chapel, God is painted as a white male reaching his finger out, like we have that image of just like, oh, perfection. Maybe even more so than the mother. The mother, she's a
Yeah.
working girl, she's doing her time. She's in there, very Taurus motherly energy, but the father is Capricorn. Actually, what is mother? Venus, did we say?
I thought mother was Cancer. I thought that was the sign
Oh,
of,
yeah, that's right.
but we're not
That's right.
astrologers. So
We're not
everybody knows
astrologers.
we're not
Natalie's
astrologers.
a hobbyist astrologer.
I'm a
She
hobby.
goes to little meetings in the back of game rooms and talks about astrology.
I don't do that.
I'm just imagining hobbyist astrologers. Like, what are they doing?
They buy books and like sometimes read them about astrology and know things, but
Yes.
I don't call myself an astrologer.
Yeah, but okay, so you're right. If the mother is is Cancerian and the father is Capricorn, think about the Capricorns in your life. Just work and go climb that mountain, and they're goats and they're sturdy and they're just,
Unemotional, they're like builders. Yeah, they are though. That's like a Capricorn. That's a thing. It's like, I wouldn't say they're unemotional, but the emotions aren't as like upfront.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point. And I used to not like certain signs, but now I've learned that I have all signs within me. And so I just sort of admire them for their beauty and what they're so great at. Cause man, if you work with the Capricorn, whoo,
Incredible.
You're going to climb that mountain. I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to stay on the Lido deck and have a margarita, and you just tell me what the top is like. And I'll, maybe I'll join you if I feel, because I'm an Aries, so I can climb,
Yeah.
I feel like it.
Yeah, but you're not dead set on it. So.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the energy of the father, kind of maybe an archetype.
Yeah.
But what would you say the father wound is? What do you think that is?
I know we talk about stuff that's not normal, but I grew up in my nuclear family was my mom stayed home to raise kids because that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a mom. She wanted to raise kids. And then the agreement was that my dad would go to work. So my dad really wasn't around a whole bunch. I don't have a ton of memories with him around. What I do have are excellent memories. He was really great and present when he was around. But yeah, I grew up in that quote unquote normal environment where my dad was working and my mom was at home. So the father wound to me is honestly that time. And I recently, the biggest, I guess, wound coming from my dad. And again, I want to say that I called him in to heal this in myself. This is not his fault necessarily. This is something that my soul came in to heal. I have that awareness of it now. I don't blame him for any of it because it was perfect the way that it played out for me to address these things. But I definitely played out a lot of the wounds in my first marriage with my ex-husband, placed a lot of the projections on him that were placed on my dad societally as a father figure. And the biggest wound that I took forward was I have always sought the attention of men as validation. Because it's I got that validation when I got my dad's attention because it was infrequent. It wasn't every day. It wasn't all day, all the time. So in my adult life, that wound played out in me only ever going to bars to get male attention. And once I got that male attention, I felt good about myself.
Yeah. And that can be an exhausting process if we keep that going, right?
It's very unsatisfying. I don't recommend it.
We're where's Natalie? Just going to the bar to get a quick bit of attention. I'll be right back. I don't know what. But this feeling of when we look about how silly we are to do these things, it's but yeah, it's we need to do these things. We need to get these attentions. I would say similar for me, definitely. But for me, it also seemed very I had to have a guy like me and want to be with me. And, I did a lot of that flirting attention too. I think a lot of it for me was a little bit of abandonment, right? So my parents divorced when I was pretty young, and I didn't get to see my dad. But when I did every other weekend, it was oh, but there's a party this weekend, or oh, there's something going on. So there was a little bit of that resentment, now I can't do what I want to do because of you. But at the same time, I always had a lot of fun with my dad. And it was kind of interesting because my mom was like my main caretaker. And so a lot of what we did together was just like regular life. But I go see my dad on the weekends and it'd be like trips to the museum, going to Disneyland. Like it was almost like a little mini vacation. So for me, it was like, I want people that I can do, like, it was all just fun stuff, but there was no like consistency of like, what's like kind of like a normal day with a dad around doing things, when I'm in my teenage years, say, it was just, I was like trips, vacations, right? Like I didn't really have that influence. And I don't know, like, do you think you would be a different person if he was there more?
I think I would have been much less focused on male attention, but here's how I know that it was on purpose. It was always supposed to play out this way. In astrogeography, like you look at your line and like the line that you were born on is really prominent for like as a theme in your life or whatever. I was born on my sun line. My sun is in Gemini and my Gemini is in my 7th house of one-on-one relationships and marriage. So like I grew up mostly in Texas and I never didn't have a boyfriend. I never didn't like I've only been single in my adult life for 3 months in 2010. Like it's just because in Texas people want to marry me. Like I joke about that. I've been proposed to like 3 times. Like I joke about it, but it's a very serious like pattern in my life that like always a bride, never a bridesmaid.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. You're just like walking down the street and people are like, marry me, Natalie.
It's so
Texas.
true. It's so different when I go to Texas versus me living in Colorado because I'm on my moon line here. So like when I go out, I don't get like the attention that I get in Texas. It's very strange, but I know that this was like a part of my journey. Both my parents, born and raised in San Antonio, like they were going to start a family there. We lived all around Texas and like I just never had an issue. I was always in a relationship and always got that like male attention externally. So it kind of like fed that wound for a long time. And I couldn't really realize that it was a pattern playing out a wound until I moved away from there.
Wow. And I kind of feel like I'm the exact opposite in that like I didn't really have boyfriends. Like I wanted boyfriends, but I just did not attract boyfriend material. I attracted all kinds of other material, but not boyfriend material.
Did you attract them because you didn't know what like boyfriend material looked like because you didn't see it mirrored to you?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And I think too, like, the abandonment issue, like in my journey, one of the stops that I came to was how much I had abandoned myself. Right. And I think like when you've been abandoned and, the abandonment wound is really big and lots of different, flavors there, but just like not having my dad around, not having be able to like, do things with him or whatever, like just that feeling of like, who else is going to leave, what else can change? And then like, I lost my home in an earthquake. And so I was like, who knows if houses are stable? Like I'm like looking at all these like traumatic things in my life. I'm like, I'm still standing after all of this, but yeah, it's this feeling of like, you want to be loved and honored and feel special with your dad. And I did have really beautiful moments with him. And like, I love my dad and he's not in the best of health right now. So it's even a little hard to like talk about the father wound, but we will.
Yes. Sending so much love to your dad right now. I know that's such a tough thing to go through.
Yeah, because it's like he's there, but it's like not that full version of him that I know and love. And my dad's an artist, right? He came in on an artist pathway and he's always made art and always done art and tried to find jobs that allow him to do art. And he gave that to me. Like we go to art museums and he would like ask me about this painting or he'd have me look at certain ones. And like, those are some of my most favorite memories with him. He's a Sagittarius too. So he's like adventurous and fun. And we would get lost and he'd be like, think of it as an adventure. Right. So he always kind of brought this like lightheartedness and this playfulness and this, let's not be too serious about things. But yeah, I do wish that I could have like had more time with him.
It's so interesting that you bring that up. So then was your mom playing out more like masculine roles in your childhood? Like what I feel like I do want to talk about, is the father, quote unquote, just a
Yeah.
binary role?
No. Because, single mothers are mothers and fathers, as they say,
Mhm.
and all of us have masculine and feminine in us. And I think you have to sometimes be a more masculine, making the money, doing the things, the more action things, and then the more mothering, right? The nurturing. Okay, you hurt yourself. Okay, come here, that kind of stuff, right? But you have to do both, right? You have to
Mhm.
make the money, organize the schedules, go do, the kind of, if you were to assign those masculine things, I guess I just kind of assign masculine things to action-based things, and feminine to receiving based things. But yeah, she had to do both. And that translated over to me. And then in my marriage, how fun is this? Like, I was being way too masculine, and I really had to like shift and move into my role a bit more and spread out and share both of those energies with my husband, because I was just so used to being like, go, go, who, and it's doesn't always work in a partnership when you're too much of one thing.
Yeah, when you've like seen your mom be like so stoic and strong, and it doesn't really leave a lot of room, or like you just don't know what that, like allowing yourself to receive and be nurtured, like the more like feminine aspects of things in a relationship. If you haven't seen it, then you play out what you've seen in your relationship.
Yeah. And my dad was not the traditional normal dad, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was not like the get him a tie and a barbecue card for Father's Day, and he liked art, he liked culture, he liked food, he was just, he liked music, like just, none of that traditional stuff really ever applied to him. So I also found it challenging to connect on those like holiday moments or in those celebratory moments, because I was like, well, that's not my dad. He's not
Mm-hmm.
out there with a big belly barbecuing in the backyard. He's like making this really awesome French dish or something fancy, like, I mean, I was always a weird kid, always a
Yeah.
weird kid.
Yeah.
So like,
Love it. We're definitely here for it.
what about you? Like, do you think it's binary, the role of father?
Yes. I 100% think that it's like, was that a quick enough answer? Yes.
That was
I
quick. Yeah.
think it is a binary role because this is something, being now in a homosexual marriage, that my
Yeah.
wife and I have talked at length about. It was
Yeah.
a real conditioned concern of ours when we got married and before we bought our first house. Like, would we be able to maintain a household if one of us isn't a man? Which sounds really dumb. Like, that sounds so stupid. But like, this is a conversation we actually had because we both grew up with fathers in traditional father roles.
Mm,
So
yeah.
like, I don't know how to mow the lawn. Granted, I don't want to know how to mow the lawn. Like, that's different. That Jenna likes doing the lawn stuff. But like,
Does she? Does she?
she does. She really does. I've offered to pay a very nice child to come mow our lawn, and she says no. But like, her coworkers, when we got pregnant last year,
Yeah.
legitimately asked her if she was going to be called dad. And I have had,
No.
yeah, and I have had coworkers ask me, mostly male coworkers, ask me who the man is in the relationship. It's like we put people in these roles instead of
Yeah.
seeing the duality in everybody. So like, yeah, I do think
Yeah.
father is a binary role because obviously, well, maybe not obviously, Jenna does not want to be called dad when we have a kid. Some people do, and that's fine. But Jenna identifies as a female. I identify as a female. So no,
Yeah.
there will not be any father. And I think you and I talked about in a session if that was going to affect the kid coming through, because I had been so conditioned to see a mother and a father as parents.
Yeah. 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 And that's a really good point too, because like just this idea of like the roles, right? And the responsibilities and the spirit babies who are coming in, they're choosing you for your parents. Like I freaking love them. They're like, I love that I have two moms, they're so excited about that. And because they know that it's a little bit safer now to be in a family like that. It's a little bit more open for them to come in and be raised. Like, hello, can you imagine our world being raised by people who love children and not having kids because they feel like they have to anymore? Like, it's just so beautiful. I think there's going to be a lot of beautiful things in there. And I think a lot of this traditional stuff is a lot of it is already dying. So like, let's throw this into the mix as well, because does it really matter? Like mother, father, what does that actually really mean?
Right, right. So that's why I think it's a binary role. Because like, what? It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. What did Jenna say to those coworkers? Like, what's a good response when, oop, that's my crystal. What's a good response when somebody's like, who's the dad? Do you know what I mean?
She was a little taken aback. We live in
Yeah.
suburbia in like a largely conservative area. So she's kind of an anomaly in her workplace.
Oh, Jenna.
But she's really cute and she's charismatic. So like people still really like her. And she's like I don't know what, maybe advocate's not the best word, but she's like a good figurehead for like the gay community
Yeah.
in her workplace. It makes
Lovely.
people feel comfortable asking those dumb questions
Mm.
because she's not gonna
Ooh,
like
I just
she's not gonna internalize that, she's not gonna be like, well,
yeah.
why would you think that? Do I look like a man? Like she's gonna be like, no.
Yeah. She'd just be like, thanks for asking, but no.
Yeah.
And I think that's why like the best answer is the straightforwardness. And if depending on who that question is coming from, you can maybe even have a deeper conversation. But yeah, there's a lot of like, this is what men do, this is what women do. And as you're saying this, I'm thinking like my dad never did things around the house, like didn't fix things or whatever that I really noticed. And my husband wanted to do things around the house, and I was like, absolutely not, no way. Like we are hiring people, like that's what they're for.
Don't touch
Yeah.
that.
And I was just like, because it's like my image of like people doing work around the house is like, it's like not professional. Let's just put it that way. And so, and then like, as you're saying this, I'm like, oh, that's because that's what I saw. And that's what I was growing up with. And, so he just like replaced our bathroom fan and he did a great job, and it just, and actually I was kind of like, oh, hey, what else can you fix around here?
I like it.
Hello.
Go around breaking stuff just so we can fix it.
might turn into something fun after this, but but yeah, it's just like, you're really making me think about what other, oh God, how many things am I carrying around the father? And as we think about having kids, like what expectations am I like unknowingly already like putting on my poor husband?
I know. Like it's expectation is the killer of relationships, honestly. Unspoken expectation. Like my first marriage, I mean, it was a slow motion car crash. We were not, yeah, I was plastered on my wedding day. Like, I knew it wasn't going to last. I knew going into it wasn't going to last. It was just like, he had a lot of characteristics that my dad had. And so we kind of played out these roles where he tried to put me in a traditional female role of being like the nurturer and taking care of him and doing the cooking and doing the cleaning. And like, I worked night shift, and historically all of my boyfriends have called me cold, because if you want me to do something, I'm going to do the opposite. So no, I did not do all the cooking, and no, I did not do all the cleaning. And I, in turn, still expected him to make more money than me. And he joked one time that he wanted to be a trophy husband, and I was disgusted. And like, I really had to look at that, because like, why can't a man stay home? Why can't I make more money? These are things that I've since addressed.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that I wasn't able to see those things until I was in a relationship with a woman, and like the playing field felt even. It's like those roles were wiped away because we could do both, and we had to do both,
So let me ask you this. Did you and Jenna like talk about these roles? Like, so for example, like a very like traditional guy role that Dan does is like take out the trash, right? I am way happy that he does that. Our trash is a long way away. We have a lot of it, but I think also that could be just seen as division of roles, and like he does this and I do that and certain kinds of things. But like, did you guys have a conversation about like, I would say like maybe some of the not fun masculine or fatherly type roles,
Not specifically. I would say we haven't like sat down and divvied up the responsibilities. We both kind of do things that we like to do. Like I said, she will do the yard work mostly because I hate yard work. If it were up to me, we would zero escape the whole thing. Like, I don't care.
desert rocks.
Right. But like we have dogs and they need a place to poop. So
Yeah.
she maintains the lawn. And actually, we got into an argument about this, a huge fight earlier this year about these roles, because you don't have to do your
Oh,
yard in Colorado in the winter, right? It's just not like a
okay.
thing. So she and I would clean the house every weekend. And
Yeah.
then spring rolled around and it started to be time to mow the grass and water and
Yeah.
weed and all of that. So she started doing
Yeah.
those things. And then I didn't know that she expected me to then take care of the inside of the house. And it caused this
Right.
huge fight because she felt like she was doing everything, understandably. And I was like,
Yeah.
you just have to tell me that like that's what you want. I will do the
Yeah.
inside. Like I so now in the summer I clean the house and she takes care of
Yeah.
the outside, but she's still I do most of the dishes if we're talking about roles, and she does most of the cooking.
Yeah.
And I take
Yeah.
out the trash.
Yeah. But you know what? That's interesting because it's like, it really is like a, what do you like to do? What don't you like to do? Like, I don't like to take out the trash also because like I'm short and you have to like lift this thing up and hook it in, I could like do a shoulder out, but same thing with the lawn. Like we were living in Ohio and we had to like mow our lawns because like they come and knock on your door and like harass you if you and they fine you. Oh my
I know.
God. What's that about? Anyway.
HOAs.
So we went to the Home Depot or whatever. And I was like looking at those push mowers, that are like non-electric, which are, it's like a bunch of blades basically. And I'm thinking like, I don't want it to be loud, eco-friendly, blah, blah, blah. It was like $100. I was like, this is great. And he wanted this like giant electric, cause he didn't want to deal with the gas. So like, so we had to like plug in our lawnmower. But I was just like, and it was like way more expensive. And I was like, this is so much. And he kind of looked at me and he's like, are you going to mow the lawn? And I was like, you just get whatever machine you want, honey. I was like, you go right ahead. And let me tell you a secret. Get yourself a Dyson because it looks like a Star Wars thing. And they like to vacuum if it looks cool and Star Warsy.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
it's like, you kind of have to make it like exciting to do these like chores. God, there's so much domesticity talk right now. I feel like it plays out a lot in this. Yeah.
It's gender roles, has everything to do with domesticity.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, as I'm like listening, I'm like, first of all, queer couples are the future, ladies and gentlemen. But like, as I listen to this, I'm just like, how many roles or how many, subconscious things have I just fallen into because I'm a woman, and like,
yeah.
Where is like in a queer relationship, you question that right away or talk about that probably more, I feel like.
It's just more like obvious. It's more apparent. It's like we can't fall into those traditional gender roles. I mean, you could if one of you identifies as a man, but it's just queer relationships are just a really good opportunity, I think, to break those norms.
Yeah, for sure. I love this question about toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. First of all, toxic masculinity, such a fun phrase.
Oh, so fun.
And like, well, because like, it's like, I guess the opposite of that would be like divine masculinity or aligned masculinity, or maybe just masculinity. Without any qualifiers. What do you think? What do you think toxic masculinity is?
I feel like I have a really clear understanding of what it is. It's just like that straight white male on crack. It's like cis heteronormative to the extreme. Like, I joke because there's all those memes about Kyle's like punching holes in walls and like drinking monsters and like having big trucks, and like that just feels like toxic masculinity to me. Can't talk about their emotions. They don't have emotions. Like that is toxic masculinity. Yeah,
and I would say like misogyny in there, right? All the violence against women, the sort of like, we get to have sex with you, the sort of like, what are those people called? The incels who get like mad because, they can't have sex and all this stuff. Sorry guys. But, like it's sort of like they have expectations that they should just be able to have sex with a woman and do these things. And it's like, what planet are you from? No.
That's all conditioning. You'd be maybe shocked to hear this, but like every single person that I've worked with, and when I do Psych K or we test for limiting beliefs or whatever, nobody believes subconsciously that they are equal.
To like one another?
Everybody tests weak to that. It's like it's something we have to shift because it's like so ingrained in our society mostly in like modernized American society, the women is obviously lesser than, and secretary, and what do you call a woman doctor? You call her doctor.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but like
Yes.
women still make less than men, and it's because it's these like undertones that are still present in our society, that one gender or
Yeah.
person or race or color or age is more or less than the other.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really interesting that like that is something that I frequently shift with clients, is that I am
Yeah.
equal to all other beings. And I'll tell you, it changes the dynamic. I have done it. I do not enjoy working with doctors. And I have done it for physicians I've worked with, and it's completely shifted the dynamic. Completely.
Between the two of you.
Yeah, because they're able to view me as an equal now, if they felt that like nurses were less than, which a lot of them do because they're
I've
conditioned to,
heard.
especially men.
Yeah.
But maybe
Yeah.
more, actually,
Well,
maybe more women view nurses as less than,
oh,
actually. Female physicians, there's so much conditioning about like being better than and having to prove yourself, and like a male patriarchal, well, anyway. I just think it's interesting that nobody thinks that they're equal subconsciously because we're so conditioned.
yeah. I mean, there's nothing worse than a woman acting out male toxicity, right?
Oh,
Like,
it's
right. Like if
it
she's in a typical
hurts.
male role or a broadly, what is it? Like there's a lot of men who are doctors. Yeah. It's like double
It
whammy
hurts.
hurting. Um, so the kind of opposite, or the what we hope for, is this aligned masculinity or this divine masculinity. And my intro to that is Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm not going to start preaching to y'all, but Jesus is one of my guides. That is another story, another podcast. We can do a podcast about our guides and like talk
Oh
about them.
yeah, let's talk about that.
But he came and I was just like, no, thank you, sir. Nope, nope, nope. And then I just kind of had to accept Jesus into my heart, as they say. But he is, whenever he shows up in sessions for people and he shows up for specific reasons, it is the most amazing feeling. I feel so loved. I feel so safe. I feel so seen. I feel like I can talk to him. I feel like he's going to protect me. I just feel like he's not going to harm me in any way, like, which is, a lot as a woman. Like, I'm always like, how could you fuck with me as a guy? Right. Like, I like, look, there's a little bit of that. It's like, it's very brotherly, very trusting. I don't have brothers, but I imagine this is like this amazing feeling. And when I felt that, I was like, oh, this is a divine masculine. This is a person who's aligned, who's loving, who can step into their femininity, who can be in that fluid space. And it's lovely and amazing. And there's not a lot of guys out there in the spiritual space that are vibrating at that level.
No, there's not a lot of men in the spiritual space, really. I feel like, because they feel like it's a more feminine thing. I have a funny story about Jesus. I met him I met him in the records. And like the first couple times I went on the records, he was like in the periphery, right? Like, he knew he was there, didn't want to talk to him because I grew up in the Bible Belt. Like, yeah. The one private school I went to, I got suspended from. Let's talk about Natalie and rules. We don't do it. So
there's a theme here.
Yeah, I finally met him. It came forward, and I like, in my mind's eye, I was like side-eyeing him. And I looked at him when he came forward, and I was like, I don't like religion, right? And he was like, I don't either. And then we were friends, and then it was okay, and then we could talk.
Okay, so I love that you said that, because whenever I channel him, he's like, oh my God, what have they done with my words? Oh, I did not mean this. No. Y'all are, because if you really look at how they took who he was, this archetype, whatever you want to believe, it's all for control and oppression, right? Especially of women, especially in the church. So he is not for that, everyone. And Mary Magdalene is one of my other guides, and she straight up confirms that and talks about how she and Jesus were like this divine masculine, divine feminine, and the stuff that they did, it was like incredible. So it's funny though, because when I was in ayahuasca ceremony, I asked about the divine feminine, and I got to see all this beautiful stuff, and I was like so excited. And then there was like this door, and it said divine masculine, and I was like, oh, I want to go see that. And Mama ayahuasca was like, well, you didn't ask about them. And I was like, oh. So I wasn't even thinking that I had to invite that space in to like experience it in ceremony. So I think probably the next time I do ceremony, I would look at the divine masculine and experience that and see it in my life in all the different ways. But yeah, I think it comes in like, I think of a couple people like my cousin Brian, who's amazing. And like, he is just a very like lovely, aligned masculine energy, not all the time, but like in moments and in times like that, he can be really amazing. So I have like few examples, but not a whole bunch that I can
I
refer
know.
to.
Like what I struggled with this for a long time, like because I just could not get a clear image in my head of what the divine masculine is because I still had so much internalized misogyny
Yeah.
about like what a man should be. Like I had
Yeah.
so much of it, like putting my ex-husband into these roles, and I had these expectations of him to be a man, and like when he cried, I got uncomfortable. When he expressed his feelings, I was uncomfortable because of all of this internalized misogyny, because like that's just what we've seen. That's what we've seen growing up and in societies. And I feel like myself and my brothers,
Mhm.
like society tried to put us in traditional like female male roles, like boys are athletes, girls, sewing class, whatever. I want a burping contest instead. Like I rebuked, like me and my siblings did the opposite of like what we were supposed to do. I was not, my mom was like, you're supposed to be a lady when I was like 9, and I was like, I don't want to be a lady. Like, so I did the opposite of what a woman should do. I was not quiet, I was not meek, I was not like into sewing and stuff, like. And then my brothers were so emotional. I was not
Mm.
growing up. I was
Wow.
not.
Yeah.
But my brothers were so emotional. And like my older brother, he's since passed away, but he was straight, he was into women, and
Yeah.
I didn't know, I just didn't know how to relate to him because my younger
Yeah.
brother is gay. So like it was
Yeah.
more okay for him to be emotional. But my older
Mm.
brother might
Yeah.
have been more emotional, but I couldn't date emotional men. I called in that toxic masculinity in men because I couldn't handle it,
Ooh.
which is really funny because
Can you
they were still really emotional, the guys. I was the
I was
cold
like,
one.
can you handle it now?
I was the cold one. Yeah, actually, I don't know. I think probably it started out because Jen is a woman, so it was like more acceptable to me and my
Yeah.
internalized misogyny for her to be emotional. But like it just doesn't bother me now. I can be emotional too now. Weird.
Yeah. I can be
I
emotional
can do
too.
it.
Let's cry. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. We hope you guys are laughing and having so much fun listening to us talk about the masculine. And yeah, like send us some questions. We have
Yeah.
an email. We'd love to know like what else you guys think about this topic. Have we covered it? What are we missing? Like we're just so curious.
Like, what do you think the masculine is? Like, because I don't know that I could answer
Yeah.
that question.
What do I think like a divine masculine is?
Yeah, like an aligned, healthy masculinity, like an embodiment of that. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's kind of like what all my clients want in their partners,
But do
which
they?
is, oh, um, yeah, I think it is. I think really what I hear a lot is we want you guys to talk to us. We want to talk, right? So there's a lot of this like we don't show emotions, we don't talk about things. There's a lot of frustration with women that I work with who want their partners to open up and to connect and to be a part of this. And they're so far on the wellness train and the woo-woo train, and they're up here with the crystals and stuff. And some partners are right there with them. Some are like, well, you do you. I'm not against it. And some of them are like, my husband doesn't know that I'm doing this. Like, so there's the whole spectrum. But I think this is my guides. They're like, we want them to be like women.
Okay.
Right. So I think what we like, as I'm thinking about this, what they really want is them to be like that girlfriend part. But maybe what we really need to appreciate more about them is that they're maybe not as verbal as we are. They're not as talkative. And, instead of trying to get them to be a certain way, how can we honor them and who they are? Because I feel like if we don't start to pay attention to the masculine, we will never get this evolution that we're all working hard for, because they're 50%, they're half of it, like we can't have a bunch of divine people over here and like this group that is necessary for things to like not come along with us. I
Yeah.
feel like there needs to be more attention. And I've talked to some of my guy friends, and they're in like some, men's groups. And I was like, do you guys like take off your shirts and hug and cry? And, yes. But like, it's even still there, very like masculine, right? Take off your shirt and cry and hug, and it's okay to cry in this safe space. But don't cry outside,
No
And so
homo.
it's like, that's great. But it's like, where I want you to be more sensitive. I want you to be more open, more loving, more connected. I think just more. Okay, so this is like a concept that somebody shared with me that I like. It's like the masculine is the riverbank and the feminine is the river. So it's like, there's a structure, there's a steadiness, there's a groundedness, there's a, protectiveness, if you will. There is a little bit of that. And then when that is in place and that's really working, it's not confining, it's just holding the container. The feminine can go in and do her fucking magic, because we are magic. And but we freaking hold earth and, life in us, and we create things, and we're very portal-like, and we're very mystic. And, I actually don't know if men are really like that or need to be like that, but sure as shit, we need somebody like guarding the forest so we can run around naked and be free.
Yeah. And I feel like roles and gender and sexuality are so like interwoven, and that paradigm is kind of, those constructs they're crumbling down with all of this like fluid sexuality and the non-binary. Yes. Like it's all crumbling down. So I don't know if in like 10 years we're even going to be talking about mothers and fathers or divine masculine and divine feminine, because really it's just going to be talking about, are you an aligned human or not?
I agree. I think there's a lot of people that are doing that work right now because we needed to at least talk about this. But I think with all the other cultural things happening, we will definitely shift into like new words, new phrases, new ways of talking about who we are and what's important. And maybe even just more respecting each individual person and their own unique weirdness and their own unique experiences, because that's really what it is. I think the other problem is we try to put everybody into this divine masculine even, and boxes. This divine feminine, and are you even flowing right now, kind of a thing. So yeah, it's like, but I think also what's scary about all of that and all this like kind of like toppling down of so many things is that we're so conditioned to put things into boxes, like a little kids in kindergarten, right? Well, okay, the red goes here. But it's like, so then how do we relate with no boxes, right? How do we relate with no labels?
That's the fear. That I feel like that's where all the fear
shift that one.
I know, like if you can't put it in a box, then what is it? And how do I deal with it? And how do I approach it? Because boxes are safe. So I feel like
we can close people,
them. We can put them away. We can ignore them.
Yeah.
But honestly, that's where a lot of the fear and the homophobia and stuff stems from, because like, if it's not a man, if it's not a woman, then what is it? And we're not comfortable with that unknown. We don't know how to interface with it, or at least historically, I feel like newer generations are much better at it.
Well, yeah. And again, shout out to the queer community who was like, so no, we can both be two dads or two moms and love and raise these kids. And I remember like in, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, all this like has to have a mom and a dad. And I was just like, why? So many other families don't have moms and dads, and we don't like diss on them as much, but it was just like the rampantness of it. And I think a lot of these communities coming in, a lot of these energies coming in big forces are to help shift that narrative, right? And change how we talk about things and how we view things. And I'm kind of like, now that we're talking about this, I'm like excited in 10 years to be like, ooh, what's it going to look like?
Yeah. Because like, as we're talking about it, it starts to feel archaic. Talking about the Bible.
Yes.
Talking about the world. It starts to feel like, oh, that's old. Like we don't do that anymore.
Well, okay. So, and it's interesting because in this birthing space that I'm in, there's this really underground sort of energy around like mothers are women, period.
Yes. Yes.
Ooh, and don't you take this away from us, and blah,
I've
blah,
seen
blah, blah,
stuff
blah.
like that on social media. Like, what are they referring to pregnant humans now? It's a different term. What is it? Do you know what it is?
Gestational parents or gestational carrier.
Yeah, maybe like that. And I've seen so many like far right religious based influencers and stuff on Instagram get so upset because they feel like their womanhood is being stripped away. But like, if
Yeah.
you feel like that, you are identifying too much with the binary.
Preach.
You're identifying too hard. You're attaching your
Yeah.
identity to being a woman when like
Yeah.
trans people can carry. If they want to keep their uterus, you can carry a
Yeah.
baby. And like, what does that look like? So
Yeah.
wouldn't they? I mean, if they haven't fully
Yeah.
accepted themselves as an aligned, divine aligned masculine, I can see how they would be offended by being referred to as a mother or a woman.
Yeah. And what surprises me about that is it's not always very like far right people. There's other communities that this is coming out in, right? Because I don't really follow a lot of these far right people, but my community has started to like bubble up in this like the free birth space, like forget the government, I want to birth at home. So there's this kind of like radicalness already in there. But yeah, I love this idea of this like association with it. But it really surprised me because they're like, don't say chest feeding, like say breastfeeding. And it's like, why wouldn't we want to make more people welcomed and comfortable in this world, right?
Well,
Like,
yeah.
and like you can still use the word breastfeeding, like but it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, but it's like, you can say I'm breastfeeding and my friend is chest feeding, but the more the thing was like more like in these public spaces on Instagram, on these platform spaces where we're kind of in a, community, a public community, let's be welcoming to all people. Let's use verbiage that is like that, because words are very important, people, right? They shift in how we think about things. And so the more we can change, how we think about things, the more we can change our minds, our thoughts, everything, the world. Hello, that's why I'm here. But yeah, it kind of surprised me. And I love that you said that they're identifying a lot with that, because when I think about some of these people, they also have a very traditional masculine husband building stuff and
pays the bills and mows
on the
the lawn.
farm.
Yeah.
The damn lawn.
What is the opposite of internalized misogyny? Like, is there a term for toxic femininity? Because I feel like that's what we're facing when women refuse to use inclusive terms. You're identifying too hard. And like, there's nothing wrong with being proud of your gender if that's what you identify with. There's nothing wrong with being proud of that. But like, if you get offended, then you're not accepting the duality that's within you. You're like, if you can use more inclusive terms for other people, then that creates more space for you to feel comfortable with both parts that are within you as well.
Well, yes. And I think probably a lot of it goes to white women, because I hear a lot of Black women saying like, you're holding up white supremacy, like you're holding up the patriarchy, like, by subscribing to this, you think it's so great, but if you take a step back, it's actually really harmful, right? It's harmful to other women. It's harmful to, greater communities. And they just don't see that. And they're so in their little like bubble, like they just want to like grow stuff and be by themselves. And, I love this idea. Like I've always watched society, how like we come in and we come out, and like, this idea of like, people wanting to like grow their own food. It's amazing. That's great, but like not to the level of like, this is our community, right? Like I can see that happening as I reach and look into their energies. They want to build communities, which is great, but they have, walls around them that they only want certain types of people in that community. And so to me, it's just like, it's like, is that really what we're here to do? Is just to go back to those little tribes again? I don't know.
That feels icky. And I feel like
it feels backwards.
Yeah. I feel like the wellness community is mostly white women. Well, I'm not going to say that. It has become more inclusive, but there is, a section of goop wellness that is unattainable. But that's whitewash. Like to me, that's goop is whitewash wellness. But
oh, poor Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, did she even know she was going to become like the McDonald's of like the wellness industry? That like it's like that she's like always referred to for like the stupid, crazy stuff,
I know.
But I think like she does kind of, in her own way, kind of show different parts of the wellness space, and how, if you're in a privileged space, if you're a white women's space, when you look at some of the group stuff, you just roll your eyes like, oh my God.
Right. Like you're going to steam your vagina when we still have cultural oppression. Cool.
Have you ever done yoni steaming? FYI.
No, I have not. No, thank
Me
you.
either. No, thank you.
I've worked with physicians who like, we've had people come to the ER who like have burns from doing it incorrectly. And there's a lot of, oh my gosh, this is like another topic for another episode.
Okay.
But I work with, you know, in the medical Western society cult, there's so much conditioning within that like any holistic or like oils or people who subscribe to like more alternative wellness, if they come in and they're like, oh, but I've been doing Reiki, like one physician, I guess, referred to it as magical thinking. And that's like what it's called in the Western medicine community. It's magical thinking, which is another episode.
I kind of love that though, because we are magic.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing that kind of like blows my mind. Like I have a couple of doctors in my family and I talk to them about things and I'm like, well, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, we don't know why that happens, but we give this drug and then we look for that reaction and then we do this drug. Da, da, da. And I'm like, wait. So you still don't know why this is happening, but you're just kind of playing chemistry roulette. And I'm like, once I kind of had that, like that for me, especially like men doctors, right? I was like, oh, and this is what the spirit babies say to me all the time. They're like, they are a source of information, but they are not the source, the only source, you know, the truth of all end being. And I think if you're trying to have babies, if you're coming into this world, there's a lot of that masculinity and bossiness in the medical space when you want to have kids that you have to work through, right? And I think, you know, that's a whole other thing too, but it kind of drives me crazy. And when I read this book by Angela Garbus, and I'll put it in the show notes, but like, it was just incredible to learn the history of, you know, birthing in this country and how it really got taken over by these white men who had to have, you had to have a degree and you had to go to this fancy school and blah, 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 to like give birth. And like people have been supporting women giving birth for eons, centuries without any of this fucking bullshit. So it just made me so mad. And I really think like there's a lot of that. And when I hear my clients talk about what their doctors have said, I'm just like, God, it's so mean.
It's like, so narrow. It's just so narrow. And it's so clinical and institutionalized. And that's why they call it a practice. Like we could spend a whole thing talking about like Western medicine and birth, because I saw something recently where like Henry the something king decided that he wanted to be present at his kid's birth. And that's where giving birth on your back started, because he wanted a better view, when in fact it increases pain, it prolongs labor, but like that's where it started. And then everybody else followed suit because they wanted to be like the royals. And like that's where it fucking gets like, it's like people don't even know that we can question these things as like, why are we doing this? It obviously doesn't work when you're supposed to be like squatting. Like up until then women squatted to give birth. But
and if you think how the baby is like in the uterus and then you like tip it and they're supposed to just like rocket themselves out. What's
right? It's not a missile. It doesn't have any projectile behind it.
Some of the babies are. Some of them just shoot right out, man.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I'll put it on our list to talk about like destigmatizing or like normalizing birth.
Yes. Okay. Have we talked as much as we want to talk about the masculine and the wound? We haven't talked so much about the wound.
I feel like we talked about it in the beginning. Yeah. I think the wound, I feel like the wound is, you know, it's a highly individual, obviously, because it's really just a parent wound. So like what wounds did your parents pass on to you? So we all have our own, I feel like, father wound. Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. And I would say that healing with the father wound is different than the mother wound, you know, has different types of energy, different types of practices. But it's an important one to look at. And same thing with your mom. Like, why did you choose your father, right? What gifts did he bring you? What lessons? And again, as my father is, you know, potentially getting ready to cross over to the other side, I've been thinking a lot about this and just how much of his story and my story are so intertwined, and how much of who he is and the reasons that I was so mad at him at times, I now see that they were gifts for me to just be true to myself and to own who I am and to not be afraid and to not hide exactly who I am. And I'm grateful for that, like learning that from him through his own struggles of not being able to be fully who he is at
Yeah.
times,
Do you feel
you know?
like, yeah, let's wrap up and we'll talk about like
Oh, yeah.
what is the best thing that you're carrying forward into your parenting journey
Yeah.
from your dad, and then what is something you're going to leave behind?
100% art.
Mhm.
My dad being an artist, and just his love for it, his ability to create, and just he's so creative and so just it's so fun to be around him when he's in that creative flow. So I would definitely continue to bring that forward, and bring art into my kids' life, and take them to museums, and show them on lots of adventures and that kind of stuff. And probably what I would not bring forward, it's probably just the anger. I have a lot of that already that I'm working through, and he had a lot of that. And it would kind of like boil and then explode. And so that's
Mm.
kind of how my anger pattern is. And I'm really working to just see anger as sacred, to see it as an emotion that has a lot of messages for me. And, to be okay with it, because, when my dad was angry, my mom was like, oh, this is like the worst, and don't be angry, and da, da, da. And so I want to be able to have healthy relationships with those, unfavorable emotions, I guess,
Yeah.
less popular emotions,
Less popular.
the emotions that nobody wants to dance with at the school dance.
Mm.
Yeah. What about you? I don't know much about your dad. I've heard little bits about your mom, but yeah, what do you think about, what are you bringing forward? What are you leaving behind with Papa?
What I'm bringing forward. My dad is so his own person that like I feel like sometimes it makes other people uncomfortable because he doesn't care how you see
Oh,
him.
yeah.
So like that's something I'm taking forward from my dad is like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if being your true self makes somebody else uncomfortable because like that is their problem. That is not your
Yeah.
problem. How
Yeah.
you feel about me has nothing to do with me.
Love.
So that's what I'm taking forward. And then what I'm leaving behind the binary. I feel like it might
Yeah.
have like harmed him not being able to see the feminine in himself, or like it wasn't acceptable for him to be feminine within himself, which is why I think he got, a homosexual daughter and a homosexual son. Honestly, is because it's making it acceptable for him to see those sides of himself. And I'm leaving behind those binary roles moving forward. Like
Yeah.
it's a partnership. My marriage is a partnership. There's not those unspoken expectations of
Hmm.
roles.
I love that. And you know what? I actually refer to people more and more as partners in session, less and less husband and wife, because
Hmm.
that's how they see it as a partnership.
Yeah.
The babies don't care about your gender or your sex or anything. So
No, I just,
in that form.
yeah. I love my dad. I have a very tender spot in my heart. Every time I talk about my dad, I cry. I don't know what, like,
Oh,
I love my parents. Oh. Yeah, okay. If you liked this, let us know. Please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening. You can watch the unedited on YouTube and then reach out to us. Let us know on Instagram or email us. No such thing as normalpod@gmail.com about like what you think your father wound is, or what please tell me what you think the aligned masculine looks like, because I still can't figure it
yeah.
out.
Yeah. Because all we have is Jesus right now, you guys, and we need a bit
Jesus.
more.
Right. Well, we'll talk to you next week.